Hi, everyone. This is Diana. I'm really excited to do another round of our practitioner talk this week, and I'm so excited to be joined by Phuong-Thao. Hi, how's it going?
Hi, I'm doing well. I'm so
Oh my
excited
God,
to be
I
here with
know.
you.
I can clearly tell that you've done this many times because you're the first guest where you're like right on time. There are no issues with you joining. So I'm like, oh, clearly she has done this many times.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to do this chat with you today. I think the topic on boundaries is a topic that a lot of people are really interested in. We actually sent out a few polls to see whether people find that they have a hard time saying no, and whether they find themselves, being able to set boundaries effectively. And more than half of them actually said, they have a difficult, time saying no to people. And a lot of them, I think almost 55% of them said that they have a hard time setting boundaries. So this is a topic that I think a lot of people are interested in. Before we dive in, I'm just going to do a quick introduction of you. So Phuong-Thao is a Vietnamese immigrant woman who received her bachelor's in community health from CSU East Bay. She's currently based in Chicago. Am I right?
That's correct.
Yes. She used to work as a domestic violence counselor and policy advocate in the issues of domestic violence, sexual assault, and immigration. Today, she's a somatic and rebloom coach, supporting her clients in their journeys of healing from their traumas and no longer settling for what they can get. She specializes in somatic healing, boundaries, life transitions, self-love, worth, and acceptance, burnout, anxiety, and domestic violence.
Thank
So,
you for that
yeah,
introduction.
yeah, welcome. So, before we begin, can you explain to our users what is somatic coaching and what led you down this path to become a somatic coach?
Yeah, so somatic coaching is something that I've learned going through the somatic experiencing training, where there's so much that is stored in our bodies that keep us stuck in survival. So a lot of the times we move from this place of our protective responses like
Hmm.
fawning, people pleasing, which is a major response that shows up with boundary setting and saying no, and also freeze, where we skip the fight and flight response. So with somatic coaching is I hold space to not only understand the narratives that we internalize, but also work with what is stuck in our nervous system
Hmm.
specifically, and understanding our own responses so we don't feel shame or bad about how our body responds automatically for us. Because oftentimes our body is doing the best that it can to
Yeah,
keep us alive.
yeah.
So that way, that understanding, because when there's a void or gap of understanding, what fills that place is shame. And
Mm.
so I support folks in filling that void with compassion and love, and with the understanding of how their body works.
Mm.
And like not only that, but they can rewire how their body responds today.
Right.
Because oftentimes when we're stuck in the past, that's where we are moving through life, is
Hmm.
from our younger selves.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you led you down this path? Like what was it one day that you're like, oh, I feel like this is my calling or
Wow, I feel like everything that I've done in life has led me down this path.
mm,
My own experience with domestic violence in the home as a child and intimate partner violent relationships, and then becoming a domestic violence
yeah.
counselor and studying community health to see what other factors affects a person's health. And then I I think the moment was when I had gone through 5 years of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is great because that really helped me at the time to move towards stability when I left an abusive relationship. But I still found myself responding from my trauma responses.
Right.
And it actually got worse over time. And and it was hard for me to function in life because I was like in this rigid survival state that everything I saw was like everything was wrong in the world. everything was wrong with people. Like I couldn't see the goodness or what was working in my life. And I was like so frustrated with myself. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm supposed to be healed because I went through 5 years of cognitive behavioral therapy. Like that's what people said. You go therapy and you're
Yeah.
healed. And I was like, but I'm still stuck in this pattern. But when I began training in yoga, and that's where I stumbled into trauma-informed teaching, I was like, traumatic growth, like healing. And I was like, wow, I just nerded out on trauma. And it led me to these different modalities that was talking specifically about healing at the body level. Like the body keeps the score, my grandmother's hands, like those books really helped me to like remove the shame that nothing was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. And so, and also during that time, I was a life coach because when I worked with women during that time, there was so much that paralyzed them were the emotions of fear, shame, and guilt, but they couldn't think their way out of those emotions that were so big at the body level. And I could only do so much to help them. So after going through my own experience of bridging the mind and the body approaches, I was able to help uncage, that's like the name of my work is the uncaged path, is to uncage those experiences at the top down, bottom up approach together. And that's what Resma and even like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says is like healing happens where the trauma is stored, which is the body. So if you don't work with the body, the trauma will still be hanging out there like, hey, I'm still here.
I don't know. I thank you for so much for that explanation and, just sharing a little glimpse of how, oh, can you hear me? Yeah. Sharing a little glimpse of your story, but I totally agree with you on how healing should be, we should take a holistic approach to healing, that it's not just the mind, it's also the body. And a lot of the times, I think, when, that both the mind and the body are so interconnected, and the healing needs to be kind of takes a 360 approach to it. So, yeah. So today's topic, on the topic of boundaries, why is it so hard for people, especially for women, to say no?
Ooh. Well, this is it's very layered, and each layer reinforces each other. And I focus specifically on the different types of systematic oppression. And one common one, no matter what culture you're in, is patriarchy. And on top of that, because patriarchy is basically a system where it uplifts one gender and disempowers one gender. And the gender that's being disempowered are women. So when women are disconnected from themselves, disconnected from their nose, they're easier to manipulate and control. So patriarchy is one. And there's a piece of the authoritarian parenting style. So with a lot of women that I work with who are children of immigrants, the authoritarian parenting style is very common, where there's expected absolute obedience. And if you deviate from it, you will get shamed, guilted, and sometimes punished through silent treatment, withdrawal of affection, attention, and sometimes even physical abuse. And so those are the two common ones that I see, is patriarchy and the authoritarian style, which gets layered and reinforced, where it tells not just our minds that we remember, but our bodies remember that it's not okay. And it's not safe to say no. So when we embody that experience and narratives as a child, and we didn't get to practice, we didn't get encouraged for myself and folks that I work with, and lack of modeling. And we don't get that experience inside the home. When we move outside of the home, it ripples out through our life. So that's what I see why it's so hard, is like we don't have the experience. It takes practice with anything. But if we weren't encouraged, and especially not allowed, that's what happens. And also our lizard brain remembers that too, of like, hey, I'm going to protect you because based on the information I received, you were not safe. So I'm going to these are the different replies that are okay, which is usually people pleasing, which is the fawning response, and the freeze response.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I love that you brought that up because I think I definitely something that, I've struggled with like being a people pleaser. And I think culture has also, it plays a huge role in it. In Asian culture, for instance, like the concept of filial piety, like obeying your parents is so pronounced. Like growing up, if I defied my parents or said no to them, the first thing they would be like, why are you being so selfish? Why are you saying no? Why are you denying our request? So I, even now as an adult going through this work, I understand that my body reacts differently. When I'm saying no to someone, I can feel my body. I'm getting anxious. Do you know what I mean? I'm like getting anxious. My heart is like beating faster. And I'm like, even though I'm saying no to you, my body's saying something different. And I notice that. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's like two parts of the no. It's
Yeah.
saying no
Yeah.
and receiving a no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, that's the same if we didn't have those experiences where it was okay to receive a no or seeing
Yeah.
other people receive a no and responding from a place of acceptance and respect and honor,
Yeah.
then what fills the void are those narratives
Yeah.
that were planted in us.
So how do we say no? Like how can we, stop, people pleasing without feeling the guilt or, without feeling, bad we might be hurting that person's feelings? Like what is do you have like tips that you can share as to how do we yeah, effectively say no to people, but also, not also feel good about it, saying it and feeling confident in our, in our decision to say no.
Absolutely. Yes. So in the beginning, if you haven't ever said no or even received a no, that attachment to the feelings of guilt is
Yeah.
going to be there.
Yeah.
But with more practice and replacing those old narratives that you are bad for saying no or you are
Yeah.
selfish for saying no,
Yeah.
and replace it with, I can be good and say no.
Mm.
I can love you and say no. I
Mm-hmm.
can care about you
Mm-hmm.
and say no.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, replacing those old narratives with new ones
Yeah.
that where no is okay, and practicing it with like people, with certain people. So, like, I always recommend either my one-on-one work or group coaching or
Mm-hmm.
workshops is to find a few safe individuals or even a community
Mm-hmm.
that you want to share with them that, hey, I'm trying something new and I want to feel more at ease and confident in saying no. So,
Mm-hmm.
can I practice that with you?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say no, if you ever invite me, to actually say thank you, to celebrate me, and
Mm-hmm.
let me know, like, that's amazing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for saying no.
Yeah.
And like, because the important thing for our nervous systems is that it needs new experiences where it's
Right.
okay to
Right.
say no,
Right.
and you're going to receive support. You're going to be
Mm-hmm.
celebrated. So you're going to have new experiences that will replace those past ones
Mm-hmm.
where it wasn't okay. So that's why when we're doing anything that involves the nervous system, it's always important to go slow and doable. So once you find those safe people or community,
Mm-hmm.
then what area of your life do you want to start saying no in?
Mm-hmm.
So start in like the doable territories for you. So is that in your
Okay.
friendships, your
Mm-hmm.
romantic partnerships, maybe in your sexual partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even with a neighbor or even a stranger,
Right.
or family or certain family members? Because I know the number one most difficulty that I find when working with women is saying no to their parents.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, like, what if you can say no to your parents? What ways can you say no?
Mm-hmm.
So then you can build your capacity, your experience with them. Okay, you said no to smaller requests.
Mm-hmm.
So you can build your capacity to say no to bigger requests. Because the
Mm-hmm.
thing with the nervous system is if anything is too big, too much, happen too soon, the nervous system will go into that self-protective automatic
Uh,
response. So you can go into a deeper freeze or even get stuck in the people pleasing
yeah.
tendency.
Yeah.
So that's why easing into it or going where it's doable is so important when doing something that your body remember was not safe to do.
That's a really good point. It's like try to learn to walk before you try to learn to run. So, um, you know, maybe like start small and like build it up as you go, which I think in my own experience, I think I'm getting better at saying no, but I think sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm not ready to sort of define my parents in this way yet. And then I find myself, my body, as I mentioned, just being more reactive and in that, like you mentioned, in that like freeze or fight or freeze mode, I definitely find myself in moments like that. So, my next question is, what do setting boundaries look like? Like setting healthy boundaries. What does that look like? And how do we do that?
So setting healthy boundaries is connected to your ability to sense what your needs are,
Mm,
what your limits are, what your capacity is, and also what are your preferences. Because
mm,
it's difficult to set healthy boundaries when you don't even know that about yourself.
right.
So that's where you override a lot of your no's and your limits and capacities and overgive and overdo is from that place where unhealthy boundaries is connected to you don't know what your limits and capacity and your needs
Mm-hmm.
and preferences are. So when you begin to discover, make space to like, ooh, what are my needs? And in different seasons of your life, your needs are going to shift too. So
Right,
what you need in
right.
one season is going to be different for another season. And also, like once you get to know like, okay, what do I have energy for too? Like, and also being able to give yourself permission to change your mind when life
Mm,
happens. Like, for example, like last year, this was right before the pandemic, and I was going through a divorce, and I just like this eco retreat happened or workplace that I was at ended up being toxic, so I ended it at 5 weeks when I was supposed to be there for 4 months. So a lot of
wow.
things happen at the
Yeah.
same time, and I had like other commitments that I had, and I was like, I cannot show up fully
Mm,
in these different things because
right.
life is just hitting me all at
Yeah,
once right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
And like, I would not honor the other person if I showed up basically rock bottom. Like, I
yeah.
would not be of service to anyone in that
Right,
place. So,
right.
like, how can I allow myself to change my mind? And like, healthy boundary setting is really being honest about that
Yeah,
and not being flaky without
yeah,
communication.
yeah,
But communication is a huge part of setting
yeah,
healthy boundaries
yeah.
because if we're not communicating, the other person doesn't know what's happening for
Mm-hmm.
you, or like you don't have the capacity, you don't have the energy, and like you can't show up fully, then this is how the whole truth looks like. And
Yeah.
then also like during that time, you also get to weed out those who are used to extracting and only interested in extracting from you too.
Mm, mm. That's such a good point. That's a really, really, really good point. And I love the fact that you mentioned sort of gauge how you feel, because I think now I'm like, if I am not able to show up 100%, even if it's like going to dinner with a friend, I'm just going to be like, I'm sorry, but I'm not feeling up to it because I'm not only doing myself a disservice, but I'm doing the other person disservice as well. So I think, you know, if I say yes, I'm like, no, like I need to just be like, it's really what I want to do. So yeah,
Absolutely. Especially during the pandemic, one
yeah.
common one is an emotional boundary. And people are like,
Mm,
what is an emotional boundary? And it's like, what's your emotional capacity to hold space for other people? And also checking with the other person if they have emotional capacity to hold space for you. Because if they're
mm,
not doing well, or
yeah.
they don't have, they're just like out of like they're disassociated, you're going to feel that. The other person's going to feel that. You're spacing out, you're zoning
Mm,
out. And when you're like opening up and being vulnerable, it can also be, you also experience a rupture of like, ooh, I don't feel heard.
mm-hmm,
Ooh, I don't feel seen. Oh, so like there could also be unintentional harm that's done when you're not
mm,
communicating what your real capacity is.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. You work with a lot of Asian women, and you know, Asian women have a double advantage, you know, being women on one hand and also being, you know, people of color. So how do you think this influences the way that we show up, especially in the workplace? I think, you know, I hear from a lot of, you know, my peers and friends, you know, they're like, if I say no, if I don't take on more at work, it might hinder my ability to get, to get a promotion, or it might make me seem that I'm not a team player, that I'm not up for the new challenges. So what are your thoughts on this?
Ooh, so
It's a big
again,
one.
systemic oppression is a major one. And there are a
Yeah.
couple, because systemic oppression is like an umbrella term,
Yeah.
just like health. But then there's like, what are all these other ways that embody health? And so systemic oppression, when it comes to the workplace, white supremacy. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're talking about America,
Yeah.
in the US,
Yeah.
white supremacy is what dominates the workforce. And
Mm.
still today in leadership is still made up of white men.
Yeah.
And so when you still have patriarchy dominating the collective,
Yeah.
and you have these people in position of power, and you get reinforced where Asian women are not allowed to say no
Yeah.
to people specifically in positions of power. You're
Yeah.
not allowed to question people in position of power, talk back to people in position of power, especially men. You weren't allowed to talk back to your dad or say no, or to
Hmm.
any other men in your life
Yeah.
growing up. You don't have the, again, like as I shared earlier, you don't have the experience, the confidence, and your body remembers like, ooh, it's not okay.
Yeah.
Not just with men and people in positions of power, but for Asian women who grew up in America,
Yeah.
where it's not okay to behave a certain way with white folks. And that's the model minority myth that we
Hmm.
were taught, but we were not given, or we weren't educated about until, really, I didn't learn about that until last year. I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I silent myself. No
Oh
wonder
my God,
I
same
don't rock
here.
the
Yeah.
boat. And
Hmm.
of course, that's going to show up in the workplace.
Hmm.
It's like, you don't
Hmm.
want to be shown as not a team player, because
Hmm.
that's going to go against what the model minority myth
Yeah. Yeah.
teaches us. But the thing is, that cages us and disempowers us from speaking up. So that's
Mm.
why it's so, again, the different layers that get reinforced on top of one another. And it's like, where you can break through is like being aware of that and
Yeah.
peeling
Yeah.
one layer at a
At a
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you brought up, the model minority myth. I think it's something that I just sort of learned about last year. And I think, but it's really true. I think we're all living it, even though like unconsciously living it. But yeah, I think with, with all the anti-Asian hate crime that sort of increased with the coronavirus pandemic, I think it really shed light on, I don't want to call it crisis, but the challenges that Asian Americans face. So, in a way that I'm not that I'm glad, but I think there's the silver lining with all of this is that, there's more attention on the Asian American challenges and the issues that pertain to us. So, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So thanks for bringing that up. I know you have a coaching program that's coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that.
Yeah.
So, one of my group coaching programs is called the Uncaged Boundary Group Coaching Program. And for the past few cohorts, I've opened it up to women of color, but I just opened up an additional cohort for
Okay.
Asian women, because this
Amazing.
has been a request. And so for that, that really helps. So I have it in two parts. So the first 4 months, we are going to dive into our inner garden. So like the
Mm.
foundation of like what was planted in us, what is keeping us stuck. And like
Mm.
because of that, when we have that awareness, we can make different decisions. But if we're living unconsciously, like if you watch the movie The Matrix, you just continue on
Yeah.
in that pattern.
Yeah.
And then also like, and then bridging that to like, because like that's where you discover what your needs are,
Mm.
what your preferences are, what even your desires, like what do
Mm.
you actually truly desire, what would
Right.
light you up,
Yeah.
and connecting that to boundaries of like,
Mm.
what are your boundaries, how does
Mm.
your boundaries look like with each person you're in
Mm.
relationship with, because
Mm.
that's going to be different from one person to another.
Right.
And also learning and practicing together in a community of other women, because I host practice sessions where we get to say no to each other
Oh, I love that.
and also receive a no. And then
Mm.
also, how does that land in your body?
Ooh, I love that.
And making space for that. Because once we sit with the discomfort,
Yeah.
where it's not scary anymore, we can
Yeah.
be with like it's an appropriate discomfort of like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, okay, well, I've never experienced this,
Yeah.
but it's okay.
Yeah.
And then because once we, again, the new experiences and the work done in community, we get to create a different culture than what we were raised in, where
Mm-hmm.
today is actually okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to do and live differently because we
Mm-hmm.
can't live life on our own terms if we keep saying yes for
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so that's what we do in the first 4 months together.
Okay.
And another piece is connecting all of those two parts with our whole self expression.
Mm.
Because a lot of that is, again, all of this work is interconnected because if we were shamed and repressed, because that's, again, that goes with we were neglected, like we're told we're too much, or, and we remember that, or like we
Mm.
just felt like we didn't matter. And
Mm.
then, so all these different stories of shame and repression cages certain parts of our expression
Mm.
where being who we are is not okay. So when we work through all of those pieces, that's why I call it uncaged, is
Mm.
because when you go on this journey with a community of other brave women that are also walking on this journey alongside you,
Yeah.
that's where there's like different pieces of you that come out and you feel like a lot, like so alive, like you're no
Mm.
longer feeling like a shell of yourself.
Mm. Amazing. So it's a 4-month program. And when does this start?
It starts the week of September 26th.
Okay. So it's coming up. So yeah, for anyone who's interested in the coaching program or in booking a one-on-one with Phuong-Thao, you can go on the Holistic Panda, and we also offer initial discovery calls. So if you want to just learn more about her services or what somatic coaching is, I've learned a lot through you. So I'm really glad that we connected. Prior to us connecting, I've heard of somatic coaching, but I didn't really realize what it was and what it entails. And upon doing more research on it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, because it really takes a 360 approach to healing, and the mind and the body are really interconnected. So I love that somatic coaching really addresses that. We have a few more minutes. Can you share? This is actually one of my favorite questions. Can you share, a memorable client story that that you might have? Yeah, like any memorable client story that you would want to share.
Yes, yes. Oh, so there was a client that I was working in one of my group coaching programs, and one of the things that she was struggling was connecting to her anger.
Oh, okay.
Anger was something that was repressed. And again, anger is connected to your no. And like for her, she grew up like learning that explosive anger was okay. So that was what she had embodied in her early adult years until she met someone where it was like, your anger is scary. Like, that's not, I don't feel safe around that.
Oh,
So
wow.
she went on the other extreme spectrum of repressing it. And so when she didn't allow herself to connect to anger, there were certain experiences where her anger was needed, but
Mm.
she couldn't connect to it
Oh,
because
wow.
of that experience. So in our program, we began to learn that our anger is necessary,
Mm.
and that there's a range of anger. So the first warning sign is annoyance. And like
Mm.
if someone keeps violating your boundaries,
Mm.
that's where the anger comes in. And like sometimes just the rage will come in too. But the thing is, if you wired your body to bypass the fight response or even the
Mm.
flight response,
Mm-hmm.
she was stuck in a deep freeze. So I helped
Mm.
her to work slowly to come out of the freeze and slowly reconnect with her anger. And today, she doesn't feel guilty about saying no because
Oh,
she
amazing.
knows that it's necessary,
Mm.
and that she was calling it um, anger as a superpower,
Ah, wow.
because she would feel comfortable communicating like, hey, like this is not okay, and that's like the annoyance phase, like this is how I feel, and like if you keep doing it,
Mm.
then this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that she gave people opportunities to like, hey, this is where I am. If you keep doing this, this is what's going to happen. And
Mm.
then, like, again, so it was really powerful to watch her come back to her anger and claiming it as a superpower.
Yeah, like it's like she's channeling it in a more positive and empowering way, which is
It's,
like anger isn't a bad thing, but it's like if you learn to channel it,
no,
positively.
absolutely. And especially, yeah, because she's also an Asian woman too, and
Yeah,
that's often an emotion for
yeah,
many.
yeah,
Okay, for many Asian women, is that anger is not allowed.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a beautiful story. And I myself am interested in working with you as well. So I think I also, I think with your, seems similar with your client, I think anger is something that I don't really know how to like use effectively. And I think for me, I just tend to when I get annoyed, I just try to repress everything. And I'm like, no, like you should
Mm.
not be feeling this way. Like, so I think going back to the people pleasing tendencies, I think those are very sort of intertwined. So yeah, I learned a lot today. So thank you so much. And having said that, we're coming to the end of the chat. So I want to thank you again so much for, doing this with us. And yeah, and for anyone who's interested in working with Phuong-Thao or signing up for her group coaching program, check out her profile on the Holistic Panda. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. Such a
Okay,
joy. All right.
bye
Bye.
everyone.